Noah tore the Bible, that's right, in the hospital, with veins pulsing in anger and eyes red from disappointment. He ripped the page as if tearing a wound out of his chest. The Bible had been left there by a chaplain, but Noah didn't want prayers. He didn't want promises. He didn't want anything more from God. Just silence. Just an end. Except a piece of the page didn't fall to the floor. It stuck to his hand, as if it was skin, as if it didn't want to let go. He tried to shake it off, but the verse clung to him like a whisper from beyond the veil. He will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Noah stared at it like a man looking into a mirror that reveals what's broken inside. He hadn't asked for this verse, didn't want a sign, but maybe, just maybe, that piece of paper was more than paper. Maybe it was what was left of the faith he tried to destroy. The hospital room smelled of alcohol, blinking monitors, and a heavy silence not even other people's prayers could pierce. But stuck to the palm of a desperate man was a word, a single word, a promise that survived the tear. And with that, everything was about to begin. If you know someone who's losing strength, write their name in the comments now. This video is a breath of faith for anyone who thinks God has gone silent. Leave a like and subscribe, not for engagement, but for compassion. Every click here is a prayer that echoes beyond the screen. Now take a deep breath, because Noah's story hasn't even started yet, and he tore the page. But it wasn't just paper. It was the final thread of patience for a man who felt that God had left him behind. Noah Peterson, 53 years old, had been hospitalized for 2 days. He was admitted. After a sudden collapse, a heart blackout, they said. He woke up with tubes, beeping machines, and silent nurses. But what hurt the most wasn't his chest. It was the emptiness, the fact that no one was there. Not his wife, not his son, no one. The truth was harsher than any diagnosis Noah had. Become a man alone. And that hurt more than any cardiac arrest. Before the hospitalization, he was a musician, played at weddings, used to have a band, but in recent years, between debts and quiet dinners, he had stopped. First, stopped playing, then stopped talking, and eventually stopped believing. Faith became a blurry backdrop in memory, something he sang for a paycheck, but no longer felt. Life had grown heavy, dreams had fallen silent. When the doctors mentioned surgery, Noah just nodded. Do what you need to do, he muttered. No energy, no fear, like a man who no longer cares how his story ends. The next morning, the chaplain came, worn brown suit, kind eyes. He left a small Bible on the bedside table, along with a folded note. He didn't say much, just looked Noah in the eye and said, "Some people need to hear God shout, others hear him in silence." Noah didn't answer, just waited for the man to leave. When alone, he glanced at the Bible with disdain. The note remained untouched. The leather cover was worn out. What's the point, he thought. The anger came like a reflux from the soul. With a sudden motion, he grabbed the Bible, opened it in the middle, and tore a page, hard, bitterly, like someone making a statement to the heavens. The pages flew like feathers without an owner, but one piece just once stuck to his sweaty palm. He tried to shake it off, rubbed his hand, wiped it, but the fragment wouldn't let go. It was damp, stuck, clinging, and when he finally looked at the piece, it read, "He will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord." The impact was immediate. Noah froze. For a second, he forgot he had torn the Bible, forgot the hospital, the Ford drip, the machines beeping. All he could see was that verse, once, twice, 3 times, as if it had been written just for him, as if it answered a question he hadn't dared to ask. He laughed, a short laugh, bitter, seriously. God, now. But deep down, something cracked, not broken yet, just cracked. He looked around. The room was the same as before, but somehow, everything felt different. As if that small piece of paper had shifted the atmosphere, as if a silent presence had entered and was now watching. Noah tried to ignore it, threw the fragment in the trash, wiped his hand, turned to his side, but the verse echoed inside him like a drumbeat. He will have no fear of bad news. But Noah had heard bad news his entire life. His father's cancer, his brother's death, his son's silence. The fights that muted his marriage, God's silence. Steadfast, he thought, trusting. He felt like the opposite of that. When he woke from the nap he forced himself into, the paper was no longer in the trash. It was on the dinner tray, sitting on top of the bread. exactly there, and this time, Noah couldn't touch it. He just stared at it for a long while, and for the first time in a long time, he felt something that resembled a calling, but no one expected what would come next, a word that clings to the soul. Noah didn't speak to anyone that day. When the nurse came in to check his blood pressure, he simply extended his arm without making eye contact. When the tech came to draw blood, he didn't say good morning. The verse was still there, not on his hand anymore, but in the air, like a scent you can't name, but know is present. The torn piece of the Bible now rested on the tray, folded but visible. Noah didn't have the courage to touch it, but he also couldn't throw it away. He felt that if he tried again, something worse might happen, as if he were testing the limits of a mercy that had already expired. Trust. The word echoed quietly. He had trusted once, in medicine, in marriage, in faith, and all of that had slipped through his fingers like sand. What remained was exhaustion, a deep exhaustion that sleep couldn't cure, a soul-level weariness. Noah wasn't angry at God, he just didn't see the point in looking for him anymore. He didn't feel him, didn't hear him, saw no signs. Life was concrete, pain real, and God's silence deafening. Later that afternoon, the chaplain returned, knocked softly, waited. Noah didn't respond. The man came in, saw the verse fragment on the tray, and just smiled, like someone who knew a seed had already been planted. "Good afternoon, Mr. Peterson," he said gently. "Is there anything I can do for you today?" Noah simply looked up. Silence was enough of an answer. The chaplain didn't insist. Before leaving, he said quietly, "Sometimes God doesn't shout, he writes slowly," and left, making the room feel even heavier. Noah stared at the fragment. Write slowly. Then why did that verse feel like it was screaming inside him? That night, Noah didn't sleep. He laid on his back, staring at the ceiling. And that's when the memory hit like lightning slicing through the sky. It was a spring afternoon. He was in the garage, teaching his 9-year-old son 3 chords on the guitar. The boy fumbled, laughed, fumbled again, then finally got it. And Noah smiled. That same day, he had said, "Son, someday, music will remind you who you are." But time had taken the boy, and the music, and that sentence too. Noah hadn't seen his son in 7 months. Didn't even know if he still played, or prayed, or remembered. All he knew was that the garage days still hurt, because it was the last time he felt like he got something right. He turned to look at the piece of paper. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. Did his son still trust in anything? When morning came, there was a white envelope by his pillow. Noah blinked in confusion. He didn't remember anyone coming in. Inside, there was no letter. A card with 3 words written in cursive. "Your heart remembers." He froze. No one knew that phrase. No one, except his son. And God. He stood up, for still attached, and looked out the window. The city was still asleep. The streets were wet from the night rain. And he felt for the first time in years that he wasn't alone. It wasn't certainty. It was an echo. A subtle nudge in his conscience. Something shifting, slowly. At breakfast. There it was, again the verse. On the tray, same spot. Noah asked the nurse, "Did you put this here?" She raised her brows. "Put what?" "This paper." "No, sir. It was there when I got here." He smiled, but only slightly, almost imperceptibly, because deep down, the old question still stirred. But would God really speak to someone like me? That doubt would follow him until the next midnight, when faith bleeds in silence. The next night, Noah dreamed again. But it wasn't like those blurry dreams that vanish in the dark. It was vivid, sharp, almost tangible. He was sitting in an old church, way in the back pew, like someone who doesn't want to be seen. Up front, the altar was lit with trembling candles. Beside him, a child swung his legs. It was his son, much younger. Big eyes, small hands, wearing the same blue shirt from the day they played guitar together for the first time. The boy held a page in his hand, the same torn page, the same verse. He looked at Noah and smiled with a gentleness that hurt, and said, "Daddy, don't be afraid of bad news." Then he pointed to the altar, where a wooden cross was dripping water, and from the water, words formed on the floor. "Trust is not the absence of pain, it's presence in pain." Noah woke up gasping, looked around, TV off, lights dimmed, heart monitor steady, but his chest, it ached, not like the first time, during the collapse. This was different, a pain of remembering, a pain of regret. He sat up slowly, feeling his body still weak, but his spirit restless. What did the dream mean? Why did the boy feel so real? And why did that verse return again, always, relentlessly? On the nightstand was the note the chaplain had left on the first day, still unopened. Noah reached for it, hesitated, then unfolded it. It said, "If you tear everything up, at least let one word stick to your soul." Was that a divine challenge, or a reminder that nothing happens by accident? He turned back to the verse. His heart is steadfast. A lie. His heart was shattered. But what if it was prophecy? Later that morning, Noah did something he hadn't done yet. He asked for pen and paper. The nurse seemed surprised. It was the first thing he'd requested. She brought it quickly. He wrote slowly. Each word felt like digging through stone. He started a letter to his son. "Forgive me for disappearing. Forgive me for not believing in myself or in God. I don't know how to ask you to come back. But if this letter ever finds you, know that my heart remembers you and that I can still play." But he didn't finish the letter. Stopped halfway. Tears fell onto the paper, smudged the ink dot, and in that moment, a nurse came running in, alarmed. "Noah, are you all right?" Your heart rate went up. He just shook his head. "It's just emotion." For the first time, the nurse sat beside him. She was young, but her eyes looked like they'd seen too much pain. "Can I tell you something?" she asked. Noah nodded. "My dad tore a Bible. When my mom died, screamed at God, broke everything in the house. But years later, it was a piece of that same Bible that brought his faith back. He found it in an envelope. It was the verse my mom loved most. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death." She paused. "God isn't offended by pain. He draws near to it." Noah looked at her as if he was seeing someone sent on purpose. "Do you really believe he still cares about someone who gave up on him?" She smiled. "If he didn't, you wouldn't be here, and that paper wouldn't keep following you." She pointed at the verse, now resting on the table. "He will have no fear of bad news." Noah took a deep breath. "I've been afraid of everything. The collapse, the loneliness, watching my son repeat my mistakes. But now, what scares me the most is believing again." The nurse gently squeezed his hand. "Then start there, because faith often grows in fear." That night, Noah tried to pray. He tried, didn't know how to begin. So he just whispered, "If you still hear me, speak again, even if I don't want to listen." Silence, but a different kind of silence. Like a room waiting for a miracle. Like the pause between breath and life. And while he tried to sleep, the page slipped off the nightstand. On its own, landed softly on the floor. And Noah dreamed again, of the boy, the church, the guitar playing faintly in the background. But this time, the altar was empty. There was only an open Bible, and a beam of light shining on the torn page. And it was in that moment that everything began to change. A psalm on the wall. The next morning, light entered the hospital room before the nurse. Noah woke without pain. It wasn't exactly physical relief. It was as if something inside him had been rearranged, as if during the night an old piece had fallen back into place. He sat up slowly, rubbing his wrists. The heart monitor still pulsed steady.com. But when he looked at the window, he froze. There, on the glass still foggy from the nights, humidity, something was written. Words, shaky letters, but readable. Psalm 112, banding 7, no punctuation, no decoration. Just that. He got up, walked toward the window, trembling, ran his hand across the glass. The text was really there, as if traced by a finger. But who had written it? He hadn't had any visitors. Hospital staff wouldn't do that. Was it a prank? Or was it something else? Noah's heart started to race, not from fear, but from something else. As if that number, that psalm, had just been freshly printed. Urgent, divine. He went back to the bed, picked up the Bible, the same one, the one he had torn, opened it carefully, searched for the page, and there it was, complete, intact, between other damaged pages. He will have no fear of bad news. His heart is steadfast, trusting in the Lord. This time, he read it out loud. Once, twice, 3 times. The sound of his own voice speaking those words echoed beyond the room. He read like someone sealing a covenant, like someone digging through the chest to find what still beats. At that moment, the hospital chaplain entered, a gentle-voiced woman, white hair, soft steps. She sat next to him, saying nothing, just listened. When he finished reading, she said, Maybe God is trying to speak through what you tried to destroy. Noah looked at her. I tore that page. She smiled. But the promise can't be torn. It's eternal. Noah closed his eyes. A tear slipped out. Why is he still speaking to me? She touched his hand. Because he never stopped. Silence lingered between them like reverence. Then she stood. Before leaving, she added firmly, read that psalm every day. Even if your faith fails, repeat those words. Sometimes it's our voice that carries faith back to the heart. Noah took a deep breath, looked again at the Bible, and this time, he didn't just read. He prayed, word by word, like someone dusting off the soul, like someone learning to walk again. Lord, today I don't ask for healing or answers. I just ask that my heart would trust again, that I would learn not to fear bad news, that I would be firm in you, even when everything around me shakes. Teach me to believe again. And if this prayer is for someone other than me, let them feel your presence too. Let them read with me. Let them pray with me. And together, may our voices be heard. Amen. If this prayer spoke to your heart, write the name of someone who needs this promise in the comments. Maybe today is the day someone's confidence is restored. Share this story with someone who needs to read this psalm in faith. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Not for me, but for every soul still waiting to hear that. God still writes stories with torn pages. And it was on that morning's silent, written in fog, that Noah started reading again and started being read by heaven. But what happened that next night was even stranger. The visit that wasn't on the list. Midnight fell over the hospital like a heavy veil. It was the kind of night where everything seemed suspended. Sound thoughts. Noah had managed a few hours of sleep after the prayer, but something woke him around 3 a.m. It wasn't pain. It wasn't noise. It was a melody. Soft, slow, familiar. An old hymn. Something he used to play on the guitar with his eyes closed and his soul wide open. It is well with my soul. But who was playing it now? He sat up in bed, slowly, alert. The room was still dark, lit only by the hallway lights seeping through. The door crack. The music was coming from there. Outside or inside. He stood up, careful not to disturb the senses. Opened the door gently. The hallway was empty. The music stopped the moment the door creaked. Silence. He returned to the room. And that's when he saw it. On the bedside table, there was a folded piece of paper. His name was written on it. Noah P. With shaking hands, he opened it. It was the psalm, the same one, written by hand. Soft, rounded letters, as if written with care. And at the bottom, one more phrase. His heart is steadfast. Noah covered his face. His eyes burned. Who wrote this? He whispered. But as always, the room replied only with silence. The next morning, he asked the nurses about visitors. No one was recorded. No notes. No movement. But one of them, the same nurse who brought him pen and paper, looked at him and said, Mr. Peterson, sometimes God sends someone, not to be seen, but to be remembered. Then she left, leaving more questions than answers. While showering, Noah hummed. For the first time in months, it was an unfinished song, but it was his and it was in that muffled singing between steam and tiles that something inside him finally broke. But it wasn't destruction. It was release. After his shower, he sat by the window. The writing on the glass was gone. But now, the psalm was inside him. No longer something to read, but something to live. That afternoon, he finished the letter to his son. This time, completely, he told everything. About the anger, about the page, about the hymn, about the night. He asked for forgiveness, said he wasn't expecting a reply, but that he would keep his guitar tuned, just in case his son ever returned. While writing, an elderly woman entered the room. She was visiting another patient, but when she passed Noah's door, she stopped, looked at him and said, You used to play at First Baptist, didn't you? Noah froze. Yes, years ago. She smiled. I remember you. Once, your son sang with you. I never forgot that night. You touched heaven with those strings. Noah swallowed hard. The woman placed her hand gently over his for a second and said, It's not too late to play again, and walked away. He couldn't finish the letter after that. He just cried, quietly, but with gratitude, because for the first time, he felt that God hadn't left him. He had just been waiting for Noah to hear again. On the table, on top of the Bible, Noah left the verse, not for himself, but for whoever came next, because now, he carried it in his chest. and even though he hadn't seen anyone that night, he knew that visit wasn't on the list. But it was in heaven's plans. The testimony of someone who read the same psalm. 2 days later, Noah was discharged. He wasn't healed, still needed tests, follow-ups, medications for his heart, but something inside him had changed, as if the sickest part hadn't been in his body, and had finally started to heal. He left the hospital walking slowly, a bag of prescriptions in his hand and the psalm folded in the pocket of his shirt. He also carried the unfinished letter to his son and the Bible patched up with tape. The sky was clear that day, but what surprised him most was the internal lightness, like pain had finally bowed. In the elevator. Already on the ground floor, a woman entered in a hurry, maybe in her 60s, wearing a headscarf, with tired but bright eyes. She looked worn, but alive, carried a bag of clothes and a water bottle. When their eyes met, something strange happened. She smiled. "Excuse me, but that psalm in your pocket, may I see it?" Noah hesitated. How did she know? He slowly pulled out the paper and handed it to her. Psalm 112:7. She held it with reverence, like it was sacred. "That verse saved my life," she said, her eyes welling up. Noah couldn't hide his surprise. "What do you mean?" She took a deep breath. "I was in the final stage of chemotherapy. I had already given up, shut everyone out, stopped answering calls, stopped letting people visit, until I found that psalm in a book in the waiting room. It was folded, alone. I picked it up, read it and cried for hours. The next day, the doctors told me my test results showed unexpected improvement. Since then, I recite it every single day." Noah stared at her. "You still have the paper?" She opened her bag and pulled out an old Bible. "I kept it here." She flipped through it and then paused, showed him a missing page, the exact one he had torn. He froze. "That can't be." She furrowed her brow. "Why?" Noah told her everything. About the chaplain, the torn page, the piece that stuck. To him, the song in the night, the writing on the window. She listened silently, her hands in her lap, eyes locked on his dot. Then she said softly, "Then, maybe the paper was yours, and came back to me, so it could find you again." Noah didn't know what to say. He just felt it, like something huge was being stitched together behind the scenes of a story he could never understand. Like God was gathering the broken pieces and building an image he'd never expected. The woman handed the paper back. "Keep it. It was first written for you." Noah shook his head. "No, it's yours too now. That psalm may have been torn, but it survived in both of us." She smiled, eyes shimmering. "Are you going to play again?" He took a breath. "If God wills, and if my son lets me join him one more time." The woman touched his arm before exiting the elevator. "Then play, because someone out there is waiting to hear that sound again. And it's not just your son." The elevator door opened. She left without turning back. Noah stood there, holding the Bible, and for the first time, he felt like he was home. Not at the house, but inside himself. Before leaving the hospital, he went back to the floor where he'd stayed, asked to see his room one last time. The nurse hesitated, then agreed. When he walked in, everything looked the same, except for the table. On it, someone had left a new Bible, and a note. "For the next person who thinks of giving up, here's a verse that survived everything." And there, taped inside the back cover, was Psalm 112:7. Written by hand. Noah smiled, closed his eyes, and said a prayer, not for healing, but for continuity. The folded note in the doctor's pocket. 3 days after the video was published, Noah received an unexpected phone call. It wasn't about follow-up exams or appointment reminders. It was from Dr. Miles, the physician who'd signed off on his discharge. A man who was always serious, clinical, straight to the point. But this time, his voice sounded different. "Noah, do you have a moment? I need to share something. Strange, or maybe miraculous." Noah agreed to meet. They sat down in a private room at the hospital. Dr. Miles came in with his white coat folded over his arm. He sat down, hesitated. "First, I want to say I saw your video." Noah raised his eyebrows. "Didn't expect that from you." Dr. Verman smiled, humble. "Neither did I, but it moved me more than I can explain." He reached into the inside pocket of his coat, pulled out a folded piece of paper, placed it on the table. "This note was in here. I found it yesterday. I didn't write it, and no one could explain how it ended up with me. But here's the strange part. It has the same verse from your video." Noah unfolded the note, Psalm 112, banding 7, and beneath it, in neat, cursive handwriting, "If you found this, there's still time." For a moment, they both sat in silence. The air felt heavier, as if time had paused just for that instant. Dr. Miles continued, "I'm a man of science, Noah. Always have been. But lately, something's been breaking inside. A weariness, a hollow feeling. I watched patients pass, prayers go unanswered, and I started to wonder if any of this meant anything." He swallowed hard. "This note showed up the same day. I almost walked away from medicine." Noah stayed quiet, eyes misting. "Maybe the psalm that reached me needed to keep moving." Dr. Miles nodded. "And maybe you were the messenger." Without even trying, Noah stood, reached out his hand. "Then don't stop, doctor. Keep going. There are people alive because you stayed." Before he left, the doctor said something that Noah would carry with him forever. "Some people deliver medicine, others deliver diagnoses. But every now and then, someone delivers a verse, and that's what heals the part no scan will ever show." The verse was torn, but not the promise. Noah had been home for a week. His body was still adjusting to the routine of medications, the new silences of life outside the hospital. His son hadn't responded to the letter. The phone hadn't rung, but there was a new kind of peace within the quiet, a lack of panic, as if he had finally understood that not all answers come when we want them, and some prayers are answered first inside USB before anything happens outside. That Saturday morning, while organizing his hospital paperwork at the kitchen table, Noah found a white envelope with the hospital's logo. He assumed it was just one more document from discharge, but inside, something else, a folded note, the one from the chaplain, one he thought was lost. With steady hands, Noah unfolded it. It was handwritten. "Noah, if you find this word, know this: God still wants to speak to you." And in the bottom corner, the date, one day before the chaplain ever visited his room. A chill ran down his spine. How was that possible? How could the note be dated before the meeting ever happened? He sat down, breathed deeply, looked up at the ceiling like a man waiting for an answer. Then he laughed, softly, surprised, almost like a child. Maybe it wasn't meant to be understood. Maybe it was just meant to be received. That same afternoon, Noah took the guitar out of the closet. It was dusty, slightly detuned, but it still had breath. One by one, he tuned the strings, tested his fingers, found the chords. It felt like playing his own name again for the first time. On a quiet impulse, he recorded a video, looked straight into the camera, and said, "If you're watching this, maybe this psalm was written for you too. Even if torn, even if hidden, it survived just to reach you now." And then he played. No edits, no performance, just heart. He posted it. Didn't expect likes, didn't expect comments, but they came. Thousands of people saying they had also given up, also torn their pages, also read that psalm for the first time, with tears in their eyes. And among the comments, one made his chest tighten. Short, from a profile with no picture. "Dad, I remember the music too." He didn't reply, just cried, right there, with the guitar in his lap. And that's when he knew the verse had been torn, but the promise hadn't. If this story touched your heart, write a word of faith in the comments right now. Maybe what you share today is what God will use to restore someone tomorrow. And if there's someone you love who's lost hope, write their name here. Let's build a living chain of psalms, promises that survive anything. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, not for me, but for every soul still waiting to hear that God still writes stories with torn pages. And now that you've made it this far, know this story may have ended, but the next one might begin with you.